Hi guys, welcome back to Y'all Hearing This. My name is Kay. Thank you so much for coming and joining us over here on Patreon. We are doing some more lore and doing a part 2 for Red Velvet. We're going to do Feel My Rhythm, Wild Side, and Chill Kill, doing some videos from Bookish series, which I really love. So anyway, without any further ado, let's get into it.
Hello and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about Red Velvet's Feel My Rhythm, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of the lyrics, the music video, and the
Feel My Rhythm and
reference
Chill Kill,
in
I've
it to see what they can tell us about the incredible concept of this comeback. Feel My Rhythm is a song that celebrates the arrival of spring by inviting the audience into a world of dream where we can get lost into their rhythm. This is a track that samples air on the G string by Sebastian Bach, and the classical instrumental used in the song is meant to evoke a timeless and elegant feel that balances the mysterious and intense vibe of the modern beat. Now, much like what the title of the album implies, this comeback is the latest installment of the Rave Festival series. This is a project that first began back in 2019 with Day One and Zimzalabim.
Which I finally watched the other day.
The title is actually a wordplay between the French word for dream and the first syllables of the words Red Velvet. This means that the Rave Festival is essentially a dream festival where the girls lead us into a fantasy world full of wonder and mystery. Every time this celebration takes on a new form that is always different from the next, and this time around is no different, because this time around Feel My Rhythm invites us into a theatrical ball where we can imagine anything and get lost into the hypnotizing feeling awakened by their music. You see, as they explained themselves in the showcase, Feel My Rhythm was actually shot like an opera set in a dream. It's like a play that takes place in another dimension, if you will.
Oh, cool.
And as we'll see in a second, the story told in this play is portrayed with works of art that are referenced throughout the video as a whole. Now, the fact that the video is structured like a moving artwork is actually evident since the very beginning, because in the opening, the members are introduced through shots directly inspired by different paintings. The scene with Sugi on a ladder, for instance, is very reminiscent of the painting Curiosity by Eugene de Blas.
Oh, cool.
Irene on the swing seems to have been inspired by The Swing by Fragonard, while Joy in the Water is a direct callback to Ophelia by Millet. This shot with Yeri and Wendy looking at Joy, on the other hand, is a perfect adaptation of this painting by John William Waterhouse called Names Finding the Head of Orpheus. You can see Joy playing the role of Orpheus, Yeri and Wendy as the nymphs, and the setting of the video blending almost perfectly with the original painting. As it turns out, moreover, this attention to detail also continues in the rest of the video, because as the story unfolds, the visuals reference other paintings as well. This shot of Irene and Sugi, for instance, was inspired by Woman with a Parasol by Claude Monet. The scene of Yeri and Sugi picking strawberries instead references the painting Gather Your Rosebuds While You May by Waterhouse. Yeri and Sugi match the poses of the two girls in the foreground, and Joy even mirrors the lady in purple picking flowers in the background. When spring finally comes and Yeri is born out of the egg, moreover, the video seems to reference The Birth of Venus by Botticelli. In both cases, you can see the wind blowing, the pink flowers flying around, and the beautiful goddess being born on the water in a similar pose. The painting that inspired the concept the most, however, is by far The Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. Now, this painting is actually a triptych, meaning that it's a work of art painted on 3 different pieces of wood that are then hinged together in order to form a foldable artwork. When you close it, you see this, and when you open it, the garden is revealed in all its glory. Depending on the section, the painting portrays 3 different scenes set in 3 different realms connected to one another. The left panel shows the Garden of Eden and God presenting Eve to Adam. The central panel represents Earth, which is just as beautiful but also filled with people overcome by pleasure, while the panel on the right represents hell and the punishment that sinful humans have to endure. Now, if you actually pay attention to it, this painting is
Yeah.
wild, because the more you look at it, the more you notice stuff going on. It's chaotic, grotesque, but at the same time it's also beautiful and fascinating, and film Meridum took full advantage of this duality by adapting the visuals to the video as a whole. You see, if we look at the landscape, the majority of the scenes are actually inspired by this painting. The structure that we see in heaven, for instance, is referenced in the background of the dance scene, but most importantly right at the end, where Sugi flies into it in the shape of an owl. This is especially relevant because in the painting the structure is inhabited by an owl as well, but as you can see on screen, the main inspiration for Sugi's animal form is actually found in a specific detail of the central panel. Speaking of which, this central section is actually full of elements that can be found in the video as well. Much like in the MV, for instance, we see that in the center a lot of people are eating strawberries, and much like in the MV, some of these strawberries are exceptionally large in size. If in this scene Yeri is on water, in a pink cracked sphere next to a blue flower, moreover, in the painting we see a couple on water, in a pink cracked fruit, and next to a blue flower. On the side we can spot giant birds that look very similar to the ones that we see next to the girls, and in this painted shot we can see the landscape looking exactly like the central panel down to the smallest detail. On top of that, another hidden reference that we can find is actually connected to the scene of Joy interacting with the magical sphere brought by the bird. In the central section we see a similar scene where a similar bird is holding a fruit in the very same way. Most importantly, the bird is hovering over a pink flower that looks remarkably like Joy's. This, however, is not even the half of it, because if we move to the right panel set in hell, then we can notice a lot of callbacks in the scene set in the winter. The most obvious reference that we can find is none other than the entity at the center, which is a half-human that is usually referred to as the Tree Man. As we can see from this parallels right here, this is the main inspiration behind the winter giant featured in the video, and if right at the end the Red Velvet are sitting at a table instead of his stomach, in the painting we see people sitting at a table
the first time I watched this video I was like, what is
Looking
happening?
even closer,
but this is cool.
Moreover, we can also notice that the arms of this entity are shaped like trees that are very similar to the one that Wendy comes out of in the video. Then we see people on boats like Irene, and also people falling into the frozen lake like it happens to Wendy midway through. During the painted montage, moreover, we can also spot the same hellish landscape in the background, and last but not least, Sulgi is actually sitting on a throne that is very similar to the one of the Prince of Hell. As you can see, all of these references help create a fantastical narrative that is fascinating and grotesque at the same time. Since this video is portrayed like an opera, the lyrics mention a play, and the concept photos hinted at ballet, however, I would also like to add another possible theatrical reference, this time being none other than the Swan Lake. Now, this is a ballet that was already hinted at back in Psycho, because back then the video had some visual callbacks to Black Swan, which in turn is a movie where this ballet is front and center. Much like in Psycho, however, I think that these references are mainly visual ones, in the sense that even if they used the aesthetic of the Swan Lake, they didn't necessarily follow the story beat by beat. You see, the Swan Lake follows the story of Odette, a princess that together with other maidens is cursed to live as a swan during the day and as a human during the night. This is a curse that was casted by the evil Rothbard, which is a sorcerer that mostly appears in the shape of an owl. The only way to break the spell is for somebody who's never loved before to swear eternal love to Odette, and at the beginning things are looking good when Siegfried comes along. Now, Siegfried here is a prince that just turned 21, and having reached adulthood is set to marry a woman among those that will be presented to him at a ball. Distraught by the idea that he is unable to marry for love, the prince goes to the lake for a hunt, when all of a sudden he witnesses Odette transforming back into a human. When the two meet each other, they immediately fall in love. The prince swears eternal love to the princess and he promises to marry her, but the evil Rothbard has completely different plans. The night of the ball, the wizard transforms his daughter Odile to make her look exactly like Odette, so you have Odette as the white swan back at the lake, and Odile as the black swan attending the ball to seduce the prince. Even if Odette eventually arrives at the castle, the prince doesn't see her in time and swears to marry Odile, thus breaking the promise that he made to Odette. This betrayal will soon prove to have terrible consequences, because even if the prince betrayed Odette by mistake, his actions lead her to be cursed forever. Knowing her fate, Odette chooses to drown herself into the lake, and the prince actually chooses to die with her. Even if the two lovers die, however, the prince's final sacrifice essentially proved that his love was real, so the curse breaks, the wizard dies, and the couple lives on ascending to heaven. Now, as you can see, the video doesn't exactly follow this narrative bit by bit, but throughout the MV we do see some visual callbacks to the story as a whole. For one, the video is mostly set on a lake, and much like in the story, the lyrics mention a ball that also takes place during Yeri's scenes. Flower joy blooming during the night, on the other hand, is very reminiscent of Odette regaining human form after sunset. In this shot right here, moreover, the wings of the bird even look like they belong to Joy herself, and this visual, together with the fact that Joy is enchanted by a bird, heavily remind of Odette being cursed by Rothbard in the shape of an owl. And speaking of Rothbard, the wizard is actually referenced through Sugi, who plays the role of an entity that can transform into an owl just as well. Then we have Irene dressed in black offering the strawberries to the giant, which can be compared to the black swan Odile seducing the prince, and last but not least, Wendy foreshadows the tragic destiny of the two lovers because she falls into the lake like Odette and the prince do at the end. As you can see, even if it's not exactly faithful to the original version, the video does reference the Swan Lake quite a lot, and together with the other references, Film and Rhythm create a narrative that mixes all these sources together. When it comes to the actual plot of the MV, however, understanding what is going on is easier said than done.
Yes.
The video is literally a moving painting that portrays a dream opera, so the events that we see are intentionally left ambiguous. After all, the whole point of the song is to follow the rhythm, get lost in the melody, and embrace the chaos in a night of freedom and delight. It's about them challenging the boundaries of reality, leading the audience in a new direction, and celebrating in a festival where everybody is free to imagine whatever they like. Like any dream, Film and Rhythm is open to interpretation, or can have no interpretation at all, because to be honest with you, we don't need to understand it in order to appreciate its artistry. Since we're already here, however, I might as well give you my 2 cents and tell you my personal interpretation, and if it happens to be different from yours, don't hesitate to let me know in the comments down below. Now, the first big clue that the girls gave us is that the main theme of the story revolves around the arrival of spring, and spring being a season of new beginnings. According to Yeri, the concept heavily relies on contrast. It's day versus night, as well as spring versus winter, and in the story, some members want to go to spring, while others want to stay in winter. Now, if we consider the settings and the outfits, at first glance it would seem that Yeri and Joy are the ones who wish for spring, while the other 3 are those who want to stay in winter. In my opinion, however, this is not exactly the case, because the way I see it, Sugi is the one who wants to stay in winter, Irene and Wendy are those who wish for spring, while Joy and Yeri actually represent spring itself. Okay, hear me out. At the beginning of the dream opera, the first thing that we see is Sugi on the throne. As I mentioned before, in the original painting this is the throne of the Prince of Hell, but in the video we're not in Hell, but rather in winter. Since Sugi is looking over a frozen landscape only inhabited by crows, this makes me think that she's possibly playing the role of the Queen of Winter reigning over a frozen queendom. If this is the case, then it makes sense that she doesn't want spring to come, because she is essentially reigning over another season. As we see right after, however, spring comes anyway, and this is where Joy comes into play. As soon as the song starts, Joy the flower starts to bloom, and even if at this point it's still night and Irene is still navigating the frozen landscape, Joy represents the first indication that spring is around the corner. She's the first flower to bloom, and the first sign that a new beginning is finally approaching, and before you know it, this change actually begins to spread all over. At the court of the Winter Queen, for instance, one of the crows suddenly appears with a plate full of strawberries, which is a seasonal fruit that ripens in spring. At the same time, the video introduces us to Yeri, who is wearing a crown of flowers and fruit while sitting in a cracked sphere that looks very much like an egg. Now this is very important, I think, because Yeri is the only other character wearing a crown besides Sugi. In my opinion, if Sugi is the Queen of Winter, then Yeri is the Queen of Spring about to be born. Joy blooming in the night was the very first crack that anticipated their birth, and even if at the beginning she is not out yet, the colorful birds of spring are already awakening to welcome her arrival. This event also leads Wendy to come out of her hiding to see what's going on. As I mentioned earlier, I think that she is one of the characters that is wishing for spring, so as soon as things start to change, she basically emerges from her hibernation. If you look closely, behind her you can see flowers finally blooming, but as she steps on the frozen lake, a shiny drop falls from the sky, thus cracking the ice. Because of that, Wendy ends up falling into the lake, but after a moment we realize that a spring bird is looking out for her, and most importantly, a giant strawberry is hiding under the surface. Now, the way I see it, the sheer size of that strawberry might actually foreshadow the idea that even if right now winter is still around, a huge spring is lingering and about to explode in all its glory. In order to accomplish this, however, we first need to go back to Joy, who in the meantime is holding what seems to be the first light of spring. When she freezes it, a bird comes back with a fruit with the same color, and when she touches it, the fruit explodes, finally bringing the light of day. Fittingly enough, the arrival of daylight is also overlapped with an explosion of flowers that seemingly announces the birth of Yeri as the Queen of Spring.
Nice.
In the meantime, moreover, back at the court of the Winter Queen, Soggy herself seems to be seduced by the strawberries, meaning that, despite everything, she eventually gives in and embraces spring. At the same time, we see Irene offering the strawberries to the giant, and I think that this is the final straw, because when the giant accepts them, the entity ends up dying as a result. In my opinion, I think that the giant might represent none other than winter itself. The moment winter accepted the offering of spring, this season died in order to leave space for the next season to come along, so by the end the girls dine with strawberries instead of the yellow belly of the beast. This would also explain why in the final group shot, Sulgi is actually side-eyeing Yeri instead of being happy like the others. As we see right at the end, with the birth of the Spring Queen, the Winter Queen has been dethroned and she has to momentarily retire in her small yellow house. This might also connect us right back to what the girls were saying about them becoming queens of all seasons. If I'm right about this, then every season will have a queen, and the fifth member might play the role of a queen that embodies all seasons in one. As of right now, it seems that Sulgi is the queen of winter and Yeri is the queen of spring. In my opinion, I think that Joy might be the queen of summer and Wendy might be the queen of fall, and if this is right, then Irene might end up being the queen of all. Don't know if I'm right or wrong, however, we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did,
I do really
please
like her
think
videos.
about liking and
Alright, let's go into Wild Side.
Hello and welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about Red Velvet's Wild Side, focusing on a little breakdown and analysis of the lyrics and the music video to see what they can tell us about the concept of this Japanese comeback. Wild Side is a song that describes the liberating feeling of a person who finally chooses to express a side of themselves that they always kept hidden. This being the title track of their Japanese album Bloom, the song portrays this new side of the girls, fittingly blooming into existence as they let go of their old self that doesn't represent them anymore. If in Feel My Rhythm, Red Velvet invited us into a fantasy world to celebrate their latest dream festival, in Wild Side this inner journey continues by showing us a story of self-love that starts from a look inside of themselves to reveal their truth. You see, in the song, the story describes a situation where women who were once weak and scared eventually manage to embrace their inner strength and make it bloom into a new version of themselves. As they say themselves in the lyrics, in the past they were scared of change and they looked at their own life from the sidelines. They believed the words from loveless people who told them that they weren't good enough, and they trusted those who swore to protect them only for them to transform them into puppets full of misery. In this context, the girls saw themselves as weak because the people surrounding them wanted them that way, but little did these people know that behind this weakness there was also an incredible strength.
Yeah, once you start
Even if it
believing
was
in
hidden
yourself.
from sight, this power would prove to be the wild side that the girls are now liberating in the song. Trusting their desire to finally become themselves and keep on dancing without pretending, the girls learn to follow their instincts, stop lying to themselves, and embrace who they really are with pride and love. This is a wonderful message of empowerment that celebrates the healing process of somebody who is blooming again as a new individual. After confronting their own shadows and letting go of the toxicity of the past, the protagonists of the song are now able to accept aspects of themselves that they didn't even know existed before. This leads them to want to love more, to believe in themselves more, and to let go of the fear that kept them from succeeding in the past. The moment the girls decide to embrace themselves and speak their truth, their wild side takes over and they eventually become invincible. This is because living as yourself is the bravest thing that you can do, so after saying goodbye to their old self, Red Velvet are now unstoppable and ready to shine brighter than ever. Now in the video, this beautiful concept is actually portrayed in a couple of different ways. The first one that is being presented to us is obviously the heist concept, where the girls are portrayed as wild criminals that break into a vault with their newly found confidence. This is a concept that highlights their wild side coming to the surface. They see jewels that they like, they want them, and instead of walking away, their wild side takes over and they take over the vault as a result. If you look closely, however, this concept has a very interesting twist, in the sense that the real treasure is not so much the diamonds that they steal, but rather them finally embracing their real self in an act of rebellion. As we see at the beginning, for instance, the grand prize of this heist is none other than the red ruby, which is the most beautiful piece of the collection. In the video, however, we see that once they look inside of themselves, the red ruby is replaced by the wild version of Irene. This could possibly mean that the most precious thing that the girls were able to acquire in this context was the freedom to be themselves and do what they want. This idea is especially relevant if we also take into account the second concept portrayed in the video, which in turn uses actual wilderness to portray the wild side blooming into existence. In this scene right here, for instance, we see that the jewels are actually replaced by plants and flowers. This wilderness might represent their new self blooming, and the flowers replacing the jewels might symbolize the idea that embracing their true nature is the real treasure that they are seeking. This is particularly evident with Irene, because if Joy and Sulgi portray the confidence and coolness of the robbers, and Yeri and Wendy show the blooming beauty of their wild side, Irene is the one that shows us the importance of self-reflection in their journey to become a new person. As we see at the beginning, for instance, while Irene is inspecting a corridor during the heist, she actually comes across a mirror with a peephole. When she looks inside, she discovers another version of herself, and this version of herself is none other than the wild side that the song is all about.
Oh, cool.
In the
I like the
video,
visual.
Irene is essentially looking inside of herself, and this is an obvious reference to the beginning, where the girls announce that this is going to be a journey while they will show us inside of themselves. As I mentioned before, the third concept is especially evident with Irene, because her character is mostly associated with mirrors and reflective surfaces. Like the heist and the wilderness, however, this inner journey is also sprinkled throughout the video as a whole. Because of that, we also see Sulgi confronting herself in the room, and these very cool shots where their reflections essentially merge together with their real selves. In my opinion, these visuals are meant to convey the idea that after this process is complete, their wild side is now the dominant one. It came to the surface, and now their confidence is in full bloom like never before. By the end, the song concludes by inviting the audience to do the same, so after seeing them bloom, now it's your turn to follow your instincts and end up joining them to the wild side. In the meantime, however, this is all I have for you
Well, it was
today.
cool.
I hope
All
you
right.
guys
Chill kill. I'm excited for this one too.
Hello and welcome back to Brickish Theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about Red Velvet's Chill Kill, focusing on a little breakdown of the video, the trailer, and the Hint Fiction soundtrack to see what they can tell us about the story of this comeback. Now, Chill Kill refers to a person or incident that suddenly breaks the silence. This is a phrase that describes something that completely changes the course of what is interrupting, and in the song, the Chill Kill is none other than a person whose love changed their life. In the lyrics, Red Velvet missed the chill kill that broke their boring routine, and while their love is a bit toxic, they wait for this person to come back so they can have a happy ending. In true Red Velvet's fashion, however, the story also has some eerie undertones, so much so that Wendy described this comeback as an expression of tragedy and hope. As we see in a second, in fact,
It's a
the
great
video tells
album,
the
the whole
unsettling
thing.
story of girls confronting a traumatic chill kill that broke the silence in their life. According to Joy, this is a story of 5 sisters trapped in a tragedy. The moment a chill kill forces them to face the horrible reality they are living in, however, the sisters will find a way to gradually overcome their trauma and eventually even grow from it. At the beginning, for instance, the video opens by showing us a picture of the 5 sisters and a man whose face has been blacked out. As the girls get ready to perform for an empty chair, the picture is cut to exclude the man, thus implying that this individual has been recently cut off from their lives. The cutting of the neck, however, also implies something more ominous, because we soon find out that the man is no longer in the picture because he was killed. As the video brings us back to some time earlier, we understand why. In the story, we see that the girls girls are preparing a makeshift birthday cake for Yeri, who in turn is very pleased by this surprise. If you look closely, however, not only the cake is fake, but the girls themselves are in the basement and they're trying to keep quiet despite the happy occasion. This tells us that what they're doing is a secret. It's something they're not supposed to do, and the next scene confirms this as well. As soon as thunder starts rumbling, the entire house trembles and the girls freeze in place. It seems that the man in the picture has come home, and the girls are now scared they might get discovered, while the others stay still. Wendy approaches the door of the basement and quietly opens it. Yeri tries to stop her, but Wendy has had it. She tells them to be quiet and then disappears up the stairs while her sisters listen through the door. Sometime later, the four of them go upstairs as well, and what they find is the real chill kill of the story as a whole. The house is a complete mess. Wendy's holding a bloody rock, and when she turns around, she has blood splatters on her face. Wendy here just killed the man to save herself and her sisters, and when the others realize, Joy screams in horror. After overcoming the initial shock, however, they soon start working to get rid of the body. Irene, for instance, brings out a shovel, Sugi cleans up, and Yeri pulls the rug to find a spot to hide the body. In the meantime, Joy is losing it. She's helping out too, but it's pretty clear that she's the most affected of the group. While we don't know who the man was, it's pretty clear that he's been holding them prisoners for a very long time, so it's possible that Joy's character might have developed Stockholm Syndrome. Either way, it's pretty obvious that Joy is not taking it well at all. After the girls hide the body under the floorboards, Joy tries to sneak out with the murder weapon. Sugi catches her at the door, and as they have a confrontation, Joy eventually breaks down as Sugi barely keeps it together. In the corridor, Wendy's having a hard time too. She's having troubles dealing with what she's done, because even if that was the only way to save her sisters, she also took away the only reality they were seemingly familiar with. When we catch up with Yeri, for instance, we see that she's back in the basement watching TV. Now she's free to go wherever she wants, but she chooses the basement anyway because that's all she knows. When Irene brings her dinner, in fact, she switches off the TV in the attempt to make her get out, but Yeri snaps at her. She seems angry at Irene for forcing her to face the changes caused by the chill kill, and Irene understands, which is why she hugs her instead of fighting her. You see, in many respects, the story of this comeback is a tragedy with many layers. The tragedy is the abuse that the sisters had to endure because of the man. It's the horrible act that Wendy had to commit to save them, but it's also the fact that even without him, the girls are still not free. The reality he gave them is the only reality they know, so now they have no idea what to do without the person that hurt them. In the video, we see that in the following days, the girls regain happiness by dancing together, and that is great and all, but even that has some dark undertones. Bear in mind, at the beginning we saw the girls moving the furniture to get ready to dance, but they were performing in front of an empty chair. This implies that when the man was alive, they used to perform for him, so now that he's dead, they try to maintain the illusion of normality by keeping that routine going. Even if dancing makes them happy and brings them together, there is always that shadow looming over them. The man has no face, but the reality that he built for them still haunts them. His presence still lingers in the house, but when we get to November 13th, that is, the date of the comeback, something finally changes. Bear in mind, this story is a tragedy, but it's also a story about hope. It's about girls able to grow and overcome the trauma that they endured, so on November 13th, they take drastic measures to finally let go. As they venture outside, the girls take the bus and go buy some gas. When the night approaches, they dress up, bring out their belongings, and eventually set the house on fire with the body of the man still under the floorboards. As they look at the house burning, the girls bid farewell to the only reality they've ever known, and as they run away, they enjoy one night of true freedom in the woods. When they get to the road, however, the police catches up to them, and as they get surrounded, they understand that they're about to lose their freedom all over again. In their final moments together, the girls perform one last time. They dance because that's the only thing that they ever known, but also because dancing together was their happy place in those years of trauma. By the end, the police exit the cars hinting at their arrest, but the final shot is a recording of them frozen in a moment of happiness. Now that is the happy
that is a
ending the song
much
is
sadder
talking
MV
about.
than I
In
thought
the
it
story,
was.
the
Like, I
five
got bits and
sisters were
pieces
each
of that,
other's
but not
happy
the whole
ending all
thing.
along. It was not the man that hurt them, but also not them hurting him. In the tragedy that was their life, they found hope in each other, happiness in their dance, and also comfort in keeping each other safe. When they burned the house, they healed from the trauma and let it go, so they were able to dance one last time for them and them only. Now, whether this is really a happy ending or a tragic one, I leave you to decide, but if we take a look at the trailer and the Hint Fiction soundtrack, there is more to the story that we can discuss. In the trailer, for instance, the story of Chill Kill was initially introduced with the girls being trapped in a nightmare they seemingly couldn't escape. As they struggled with overwhelming visions, we also discovered that the five sisters might not be regular people after all. On the wall, in fact, we saw a flyer seeking to identify the girls, because as it turns out, they suddenly started to appear in other people's dreams all over the world. Later in the video, we also see the same picture in the book that Wendy was reading in her nightmare, thus suggesting that the 5 sisters might be entities with supernatural abilities not even they seem able to control. As the nightmares unfold, they seem to foreshadow the chill kill that will change their life forever. At one point, one of the members even writes the phrase "kill him" on a picture, so it's pretty clear that the intention to end his life is something that came from deep within. If we take a look at the hint fiction soundtrack, in fact, the story details the girls' encounter with a stranger during a recurring dream. Every time they have this dream, the stranger comes closer, and at the end they eventually figure out that the stranger is none other than another version of themselves. Even if at first the girls perceive this dream as a nightmare, the other version of them explains that it's not, because they are their poet and their pain. We might even go as far as to say that it's their shadow, an expression of their trauma manifesting in the dream. And even if in the trailer this other version of them seems very menacing and aggressive, in reality it's actually there to help them. In the trailer, this concept is expressed with cryptic visions that also borrow a lot of imagery from different movies. Sulgi scratching her shoulder, for instance, is a reference to Black Swan, which is a movie that they already referenced back in Psycho. Speaking of which, the scene of Joy's body in the middle of the staircase is actually a callback to a scene from American Psycho. The biggest inspiration, however, is definitely The Shining. We have the girls twinning, the corridor, the word dream written backwards like the iconic red drum. Not to mention that when Sulgi is attacked by herself, the scene is a direct callback to the final act of the movie. References aside, however, the dreams the girls have in the trailer very much foreshadow that something terrible will unfold. Irene, for instance, dreams of clocks, apples and ants. While rotting apples can be seen as a bad omen, in nightmares ants symbolize that something bad is coming soon. The clocks reinforce this idea as well, because they really give off the idea that they are running out of time. While Wendy wakes up in a carnival where she's hunted down by an invisible stranger, the other members have visions of death. Yeri is seen crying surrounded by blue roses and knives. Sugi loses her teeth as her own double tries to kill her. Not to mention that Joy predicts her own death right before finding her body. The deeper in the dream we go, the more death we see on screen. In the corridor, Joy's body is found by Sulgi, Sulgi's body is found by Yeri, Yeri's body is found by Irene, but Wendy finds them all. If we consider what happens in Chill Kill, it seems that in the trailer, the girl's unconscious was trying to warn them about what would happen if they didn't do something about it. Right after Wendy finds the bodies, somebody writes the message "kill him," and after that, Yeri grabs a knife and Joy shoots an imaginary gun. This might imply that in the visions, the girls were being warned that they might die soon, and in order to avoid that, the only way was to kill him, that is, the man that was holding them captive in the basement. In the vision, Wendy was the only one who didn't die, so maybe that's the reason why she had to kill him. Another possibility, however, is that she was the one who remembered the dream. In the hint fiction soundtrack, the protagonist was trying her best to hold on to the dream as the 5 girls wrote in their diary. In the trailer, it was Wendy the one with the book, so she was the one with the most information about who they are and what they can do. Because of that, it's possible that once they woke up, Wendy was the only one who remembered the warning, so she decided to kill the man before the man could kill her sisters. As of right now, this is just a theory, of course, but to see what else Red Velvet have in store for us, for now we'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, however, I hope you guys enjoyed
I love her
video.
videos. She just explains things in such a way. And I mean, you know, obviously these are like her interpretations of them. But I mean, it makes sense. I really like that. Yeah. After watching these, I always want to go back and rewatch all the MVs. And I definitely do need to check out Wild Side. I don't think I've watched Feel My Rhythm since I originally watched that. And that was probably a good year ago. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. Thank you so much, as always, for coming and checking us out over here on Patreon. Love you guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.